Hello everyone, you're welcome to my channel. You're welcome to Decenstitch. If you're a new subscriber or returning subscriber, you're welcome. Please kindly like, share, comment, subscribe. Please subscribe and click the notification bell. Thank you. The first thing we are going to do is to get a cup size. So to get that, you're going to use your bust minus your round upper bust divided by 4. Whatever answer you get is what you're going to use as your cup size. Then the required measurements. For the bust, we're going to have a separate bust for front and a separate front bust for back. So the logic behind this Bustier method is to make the back smaller and the front bigger. So we are going to remove from the back and add it to the front to form the cup or to form the Bustier cut. If you check a woman's body, you will notice that at the bust area, if you measure from the side all the way through the front at the bust and to the other side, then you measure from the side again all the way through the back to the other side, you will notice that the back measurement will be smaller than that of the front. So that is to tell you that the bust is going to be smaller at the back and bigger at the front. So that is what this method is all about. So to get the front, we'll be using bust divided by 4 plus the cup size plus side seam allowance, which is 1 inch, plus princess seam allowance 1 inch. The princess seam allowance is the seam allowance you're going to use to sew the princess line, which you used to form the Bustier cut. To get the back, we're going to use bust divided by 4 minus cup size plus side seam allowance 1 inch plus princess seam allowance 1 inch. The shoulder is going to be divided by 2 plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch plus princess seam allowance 1 inch. We're adding princess seam allowance to the shoulder because the Bustier cut is passing through the shoulder. So this princess seam that we're making is coming through the shoulder, not through the armhole. If your princess seam or your Bustier cut is passing through the armhole, you're going to add princess seam allowance to your armhole instead of the shoulder. You're going to remove it from the shoulder and add it to the armhole. But because this one is passing through the shoulder, we are not adding it to the armhole. We are adding it to the shoulder. Bust apart is divided by 2 plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch. Round upper bust divided by 4 plus side seam allowance 1 inch plus princess seam allowance 1 inch. Round under bust divided by 4 plus side seam allowance 1 inch plus that allowance 1 inch plus side seam allowance 1 inch. Bust point length plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch. Upper bust length plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch. Under bust length plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch. Waist length plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch. The waist is divided by 4 plus that allowance 1 inch plus side seam allowance 1 inch plus princess seam allowance 1 inch. Hip is divided by 4 plus side seam allowance 1 inch plus princess seam allowance 1 inch. The side seam allowance is 1 inch for the hip. Blouse length plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch plus hem allowance 1 inch. Armhole depth equal to upper bust length plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch plus ease is 0.5 inch. The ease is optional. The ease is to make it a bit big. If you don't like fitted armhole, you can add the 0.5 just to relax it a bit. Finally, armhole length divided by 2 plus seam allowance is 0.5 inch plus side seam allowance 1 inch. This is an example, so please insert your own measurements to get your cup size, your bust for front and for back. According to the calculation, the cup size equal to bust minus round upper bust divided by 4. The bust for this person is 30 inches. The round upper bust is 28 inches. So 30 minus 28 divided by 4 equal to 0.5 inch. So 0.5 inch will be used to create the cup for the bustier. The bust for the front is bust, which is 30 inches, divided by 4 plus cup size plus side seam allowance 1 inch plus princess seam allowance 1 inch, and that is 10 inches. The bust for the back is bust, which is 30 inches, divided by 4 minus cup size plus side seam allowance 1 inch plus princess seam allowance 1 inch, and that is 9 inches.
I'm going to assume this paper is my fabric. So I'll be using this paper to show you how to cut on your fabric. How to cut your simple bustier on your fabric without using a pattern. This could be a top, this could be a dress, it's the same process. If you're cutting direct on your fabric, always start with the back piece. This is my own method. I always cut the back first for very good reasons. The first thing I'll do is to get my starting line. I'll draw a line here, up here, which is always the air at the edge. I'm going to start with that line, and that line is going to be my shoulder. From the shoulder, I'll measure my armhole depth. Then measure my bust point from the shoulder. That's the bust point length. From the shoulder again, I'll measure my waist length. Then my blouse length. You can also introduce your under bust length if you need it. If you're going to be using my second type of dart, then you introduce the under bust length. But if you're using the regular dart, you continue this way. I'm going to measure my zip allowance, 1 inch or 2 inches according to your preference. Anytime you hear me say unfold, this is what I mean by unfold. It means it is folded there. So if I write unfold on my pattern, this is what I mean. But the back is not always unfold because you have your zip there. So I'm going to slash this place to separate it into two. That is what I mean when I write unfold on my pattern. Also, when I write cut one piece, this is what I mean. In most cases, you will see unfold somewhere there. So this is what it means. It is folded here. It's just one piece and it's folded there. But when I say cut two pieces, it means I have 1, 2. and it's going to be separated there. It won't be folded there. So this back is not on fold, so I'll slash it to separate into 2 pieces. I'm going to get my neckline for the back. As I was saying, don't use a marker on your fabric. Use tailor's chalk or erasable marker on your fabric. So we're assuming this paper is our fabric. Exactly what I'm doing on this paper is what you will do on your fabric. I already have videos explaining all this, how to make a simple top. I'll be explaining so much to make it faster. You can check out my videos on how to make a bodice for better understanding of what I'm doing here. If you are a beginner, you can check out my video on bodice for better understanding. It has been explained in details. When I'm done with my neckline, my shoulder and my armhole, I'll measure my bust. According to the calculation, the example given, the bust at the back is 9.25 inches. So I'll measure from the center back. This is my center back, this is my zip allowance. I'll be using 1 inch. I'll measure from the center back, not from the zip area. I'm going to label my lines. This is my shoulder, this is my armhole depth line, this is my bust point line, this is my waist line, and this is my blouse length line, which is where I'll measure my hip. On the bust point length line, I'm going to measure 9 inches. Then I'll measure my waist. I'll measure my hip. I'll come up by 0.5 and come down by 0.5 because I don't want a sharp V there. I want a light curve there. I'll connect it up here, bend my ruler a bit and draw it. I don't like going that way. Then from the 0.5 I brought down here, I'll connect this to it and gently blend it to form a light curve. I'll place my dart on the waist. I'm using my nipple to nipple or buster part. I'm using 3.5 for this size. I'll mark it on those 3 lines. I measured my bust apart from the center back, not from the zip allowance area. I measured it from the center back line. I'm going to extend it to the middle of my shoulder using a very light curve, almost looking straight. Because I'm using this back to cut my front, my dart is going to start from the bust point line. For my normal blouse tutorial or bodice tutorial, the dart at the back is always above the bust point line, while for the front is always below the bust point line. But for this bustier, because I'm cutting this direct on my fabric and I'm using this back to get my front, so my darts for front and back are the same. They start from the bust point line for both front and back. I'm going to measure out my dart allowance. 0.5 on both sides. I'm using 1 inch dart. Then I'll connect it to the bust point line. My dart will not get to the blouse length. I'm going to have it about 2 or 3 inches before my blouse length. I use 3 inches because my hem allowance is already in this. So I'm measuring 3 inches. Then I'll draw my dart. Remember, this is your fabric, so my seam allowance is already included. You can use my second type of dart. I have a video explaining the second type of dart. If you don't want to use this dart, you can use my second type. If the waist is bigger than the under bust, then you have to use my second type of dart. But if the waist is smaller than the under bust, then this diamond dart is best. The last thing I'm going to do is to extend this line by 0.25. I'll extend the line by 0.25 inch and connect it back to the tip of the shoulder here. I'm assuming we are cutting this on the fabric. When you are cutting on the fabric, you have to factor in all your allowances and take care of every possible issue that might come up. So one issue that will come up if I don't raise this place is when I separate these two, the center piece will be longer than the side piece. So when I'm joining it back, this will be shorter, the center one will be longer, so they will not be the same again. To take care of that issue, since I'm cutting this direct on my fabric and I won't be able to add any seam allowance again after cutting the fabric, so I'm going to extend this by 0.25 inch so that this will balance back. You can also use 0.5 and you start sewing from the hem, so that if you have any extra, you trim it off at the shoulder. I'm going to curve the hem. I'll be using 1 inch. If you want a more obvious curve, you use 2 inches. If you don't want an obvious curve, you just want to curve it slightly, you use 1 inch. I'll be using 1 inch. Then I'll be bringing my curve towards the middle of this. I won't make it a short cut this way. I don't like that. I will extend it towards the middle so it looks very nice. At the end of the day, the curve will blend well. I'm going to cut it out. I'll cut through the raised shoulder. For the dart, I'll follow this line to get the side piece out. I'm also going to follow this other line to get out the front piece, and I'll discard the dart. Then I'm going to cut the remaining parts. I'm going to slit here because it's not on fold. I'm going to be fixing my zip there. So I have 2 pieces of this and I have 2 pieces of this. This is what I mean when I say cut 2 pieces. This is what I mean. I'm assuming this is my fabric. That is why I have two pieces. If this was the paper pattern, I won't have two pieces, I will have just one. And when I cut it on the fabric, I will have two. So I'm assuming this is my fabric. You can do this direct on your fabric. Exactly what I've done on this paper, you do it on your fabric. I'm using paper so you can see it well. My chalk might not show on the fabric. So this is the back. I like to do this at the back of my fabric. I use my tailor's chalk to do this. So I will know this is the front and this is the back. Because some fabrics, they look alike. It's hard to tell which is the back and which is the front. I'll do the same for this. I'm assuming this is a fabric. This is my front, this is my back. This is the front of the fabric facing each other. I'm going to pick one of these for the side. I'll pick one of these, the one for the center. I'll pick the ones that have the lines. To cut the front part of the fabric, I'll be calling this fabric all through this video. So I'm going to fold this fabric into two. This back piece, I'm going to fold the zip allowance away because I'm going to be using this back piece to get my front piece. So this is the reason I always cut my back piece first. After folding my fabric, there is no zip at the front, so my front is on fold. If you want a joining at your center front, you leave a 0.5 here, 0.5 inch. But for this one, I don't have a joining at my center front, so I'll shift it close to the edge of the paper. I'm going to pin this down. Because it's a fabric, I'm going to use pin. I'll be using the paper tape. For this center piece, the back and the front, they are the same. The only difference is that this one has zip allowance while the front doesn't have zip allowance. So I'll cut it out the same shape. The only difference is the neckline. Also, you adjust your neckline for the front. For the neckline, I'll decide to do any neckline of my choice. I can fold this away so I can do the neckline I want. Remember, this is your fabric. The neck width for front and back is always the same, so I'll mark where my neck width is. Then I'll draw a straight line here so I can use it to get my front. I'm going to measure my neck depth from that straight line. Let's say I need 5 inches. And let's assume I'm doing a V neckline for the front. I want a round V, not a straight V. I'll change it to a round V. So this is my neckline for the front. Now I'll cut the shoulder. I'll raise this, then cut the neckline. I'll remove my pins. So this is my front piece and it's on fold. Let's assume this is your fabric, is on fold. I always do this on my fabric to know the back side, so I'll know where the back is and where the front is. So I'll write front here, which is the front piece of the clothes. I have one piece for the front, then remaining the side piece for the front. I'll be using the side piece of the back to cut the side piece of the front. So I'll place it on my fabric. I have two pieces here because I need two pieces of this. I'm going to leave some space in front here because I need to add my cup. When you separate, make sure you know what these lines represent. So this is my bust. I also need to get my under bust here. I'll be using dotted line. In order to draw my cup, I need to know where my under bust is because my bustier cup goes to the under bust. So this is my upper bust. My armhole depth line is going to be the upper bust because it's the same. My armhole depth is the same with my upper bust. I'm measuring from the lower line, not from the one I raised. Remember, I raised this side when I was cutting this. So I'll measure from the lower line, which is the original shoulder, not the raised one. I'll confirm that this is my upper bust that I need. If your armhole depth line is not the upper bust you need, go ahead and mark where your upper bust falls. Use dotted lines and label it. But for me, this armhole depth is the same with the upper bust length I need. So I'm going to pin this down. I will extend the bust line a little bit. From here, I'll measure 1 inch on the extended line. Where I have the 1 inch, I'll go up by 0.5. I'll come down by 0.5. Whenever I don't want something to be V or sharp this way, this is what I do to give it a light curve, not the sharp pointed V. When I go up by 0.5, I'll come down by 0.5 inch. I'll connect this to this. I'll connect this to the under bust. I can use a French curve or use your hand to create the curve. So from the upper bust, I'll connect it. Then from the under bust, I'll connect it also. You're not connecting it to the waist, but to the under bust. Now I'm going to cut it out. Remember to start joining from the hem so that if you have any excess at the shoulder, you trim it out, because we added a little extra at the shoulder. So this is the difference. This one has the cup and that is the front. And I'm going to do this. I do that on my fabrics to know where the back is. This is the back of the fabric, and this is the good side, the front of the fabric. Remember to use your tailor's chalk, not this kind of pen on your fabric. This is my center back. I have two of it with the zip allowance. This is the side for the back. That'll be joined to this. I have two of it too also. Then this is the front. This is my center front. It's unfold, there is no joining there. And this is the side piece for the front, which has the bustier cut, and I have two pieces for the side.